Abby, so tell me, we have two options that are really funny. We talked about pre-show, but yeah, let's just talk about what was once a thriving YouTube channel, and now it's on the back burner.
I don't even think it's on the oven anymore. I mean, I think it's we were like so pumped about YouTube 2 years ago. I think we started 3 years ago. It was like going well. And I loved uploading content about film. So like analog film. And we also started documenting like our adoption process on YouTube. And when I say we started documenting, I mean, we posted 2 episodes about adoption, and then the nature of adoption, it's so sensitive. There are some parts of it that are just so sensitive. And we're like, we cannot share all of this. That's just not realistic. And then my son was born. And we were like, ooh, yeah, we don't have time for this anymore. It just kind of flamed out. And if you go to my YouTube channel now, it's youtube.com/Abby Grace Co, I think. And there's the banner at the top still says new videos every week, which it hasn't been updated in 2 years. So,
I love it.
Don't set much stock by that.
I love that. All that says to me, though, Abby, I bring that up as it's a joke, and I know it's like, oh goodness.
Yeah.
One, obviously, you have good reasons for different things to prioritize and stuff, but also too, like, I still, after knowing you for 4 years, 5 years, like, I still look at you. I look up to you, and I'm like, okay, Abby's like one of my people who has a good work ethic and is getting things done and all that kind of stuff. But to know that, like, as you get to kind of watch your friends mature and change priorities and different things and what matters to them. And we'll talk about that a little bit in other worlds for you. But, strangely, it makes it feel like I'm not the only one, to struggle. You're like, we started this thing, and, return and effort and other things. And also, like, Felix is a great reason to, or adoption and gender is a great reason to be like, hey, sorry, kid, we traded YouTube for you. Or other things, but it's, and it's not that you can't always start back up or anything, but it's like, at the time, we had this initiative thing, like, because all of us, when we start something, we're like, all right, we're committing, right?
Right.
And so anyway, I love that. I appreciate your transparency about that.
Thanks.
And so that's really cool.
Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, like, being a mom changes a lot. Like, I was one of those people initially who was really afraid of what a child would do to our business. I love my work. I love my clients, and I'm really good at what I do. And so I remember Matt and I had this conversation. It was like one of those, like, put a pin in it moments where things shifted, and we were, in the living room. It was like 9 o'clock at night. Matt I don't even remember where he was working at the time, but I was like, I just feel like there is this expectation that whenever we get pregnant, that there's like a 9-month countdown tied to a pack of, like, Looney Tunes TNT that's going to explode. Like, my business is just going to self-destruct when baby comes. And I'm not necessarily like, I don't want that to happen. And maybe I don't want to have children because I love my business. And Matt was like, who says that you have to be the one to stay home with our kids? Like, if we're, in a place where your business is doing well, and, like, I'm happy to do that. And I was like, so you can do both. Like, you can be a successful working mom and, like, not have to give up everything that you love about your business. And I have one of the most humble men in the world as my husband, and I'm so grateful for him. But to then have our son come into our family and realize, like, your priorities change. And that's not to say that I'm like, oh, now I don't want to be in business anymore, but it's just these projects and these goals, like, they're still important, but they are no longer the most important thing. And like, that I want to leave my office at the end of the day to go spend time with my son. Like, I want to go dig in the dirt and like pull weeds while he, like, fills his watering can with literal dirt, which is not the purpose of a watering can. But those, like, it's just incredible how your goals shift when your family shifts in a way that I really never could have anticipated, because I am such a goal-oriented person.
Totally. Yeah, no, I think all of that I'm kind of learning myself. Obviously, like, I'm somewhat newly married, 4 years. And, like, we went through a phase where, when I first started my business, I was not as busy as I am now. Things were not happening. The podcast wasn't a thing. Like, I, wasn't even at my peak wedding photography, if we could, things were growing and I was really happy with it. But there wasn't a limit. Like, I wasn't even reaching the potential relationship boundaries, right, that most people talk about. But I had already known from, luckily, having people like you in my life and hearing other people where it's like, hey, eventually you're gonna ask that question, like, what would I pay to have more time with my wife or my family or whatever? Thanks, Michael Alsop. And like we didn't have to address that too much. And then now it is a thing, you know, and it's like, you know, right, like being excited. And I think too, like for a lot of us, a lot of photographers we talk about all the time, photography opened so many doors for us, right? Like at a very basic level, right? And that's awesome. And I think the idea, and I know for me, I've had those same fears that you said, where it was like, we're not pregnant yet or anything like that. But I was like, I was nervous. Like once we have a kid, I'm like, oh, we have to move for schools. We have to, you know, I have to cut down every single thing ever, you know, but then we're also going to have to like pay my spouse more for benefits and stuff like that, but she'll get rid of her job. And like you're putting a lot of carts before a lot of horses. Mm-hmm. And I found that it's like, you got to just roll with it. And luckily Sarah told me, she's like, Adam, even if we have a kid, let's say like best case scenario, we have a kid or adopt or foster or whatever, and a child comes into our home, and let's say they're new, if you know they're less than a year old, you know, like versus like adopting a 2-year-old or 5-year-old. She's like, you have like 4 years, 5 years before you even have to really care about the school thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah. And she's also like, you know, don't and we go back and forth where this is like, now it's a marriage podcast, it just turned to a marriage podcast, but don't she's like, don't you know, don't not do anything while you're waiting for a hypothetical to happen, you know, kind of like,
yeah, like don't put your life on hold.
Yeah,
that's it, because that's what we did. Like we started, your listeners probably have no idea what our story is, but we tried for a family for 4 years before our son was born. And like I mentioned, he's adopted. And so we've never had a biological child, and that's still something that we would love to have, but the Lord's not chosen to give that to us yet. And that's in it. And I say that like, I cannot imagine our son being in our family by any other means. Like adoption was never God's plan B for us. It was always plan A. And we just couldn't see that at first. And so, when we first started trying, it was like, okay, well, I don't want to play too far in the future because clearly we're going to get pregnant soon and that won't be an issue. Or, I mean, like I was like literally hesitant to book weddings more than 9 months out because I was like, I'm obviously going to get pregnant right away. And then that didn't happen. And it didn't. And so that 9-month period keeps getting bumped out every month, like 9 months. And before you know it, 2 years have gone by and you have put all your life has been on hold for 2 years because you're waiting for your life to begin with this thing. And I don't necessarily mean like my whole life had led up to this moment, because like I said, I have a career that I love and I love being married and I love my friends. So it wasn't like we hadn't lived our lives up until that point, but it was like, I was waiting for the next chapter of my life to begin and missing out on like the story that was being written in front of us and realizing like, if we're going to keep like we could wait for forever. This may never happen. We may never have a biological child. And so if I keep waiting for the next chapter of my life to begin, and I'm just sort of waiting in the intermission part between part 1 and part 2 or part 2 and part 3 or whatever, then I'm missing out on like the richness of what there is to learn right now, the richness of what there is to experience. And I'm also closing myself off to where it is maybe we're supposed to go, because I am so focused on this thing that's happening that I think should happen next.
Yeah. Or even, and like kind of like in advance, right? It's your next thing, but it's still like not happening. Like the in-between time is being extended.
Right. And that in-between time is still reality. And like, so are you just going to live in a suspended state of reality for however? Right. And I did. And I think that's like, you know, whether it's you're waiting for your business to take off, or you're waiting to get married, or you're waiting to go to college, or you're waiting, like whatever the thing is that you're waiting for is like, if we continue to postpone, like, I mean, haven't we all been doing that like the last year, right? Like with COVID, it's people are like,
we're all professionals,
right? Everyone's like a professional on pauser. And it's like, at some point though, like you have to be able to live in the midst of the mess, and like whatever that like mess or that wait looks like for you, if you stop existing and you're just in this like forever state of limbo, what are you missing out on? And like, what are you missing out on the fact that maybe your life is supposed to go in a different direction than you thought, but you can't see it because you're so focused on what you think is supposed to come next? Yeah,
no, totally. It feels like we're finally launching. We haven't like put anything out, but like eventually I will launch like a course, like my big, kind of my own educational product thing. And I'm very excited, also very terrified.
Yeah.
But we had our initial date, we signed the contracts, like had our funnel, ready to go for a certain date last year, right? And then all this stuff happens and we're like, we should extend this for multiple reasons, or like we should change this, or we like asked what to do. And now we finally have a date, and it's like, okay, we have a date and it is going to happen. And whatever I do is at my peak quality or it's middle quality, like it is getting out there. It is going to be put out there. And, there is like this anxiousness now, but at the same time, this comfort of like, no, we know when we're going to do this and we know when it's going to happen. But like prior to that, when we didn't have a date or wasn't sure, or just all these things in limbo, it's so tough. And I even, one more example, not that people need it, but I feel like my wife and I were kind of going back and forth, and I played kind of the opposite role where she, or that we had been playing, where, we feel like a little guest room. And again, we're thinking like, okay, if a kid comes into the mix, however they may do that, that'd be their room. But again, it's also like, we don't know when that's going to happen. And we also are like, until then, this is the guest room, and we would like to redo it and make it inhabitable for guests, versus like our random storage room, or whatever. And you think about the practical things, and you honestly, I think I'm learning to like get over it. Like, yeah, if you do buy a new bed or put up wallpaper or like make it move in ready, and the next day you find out you're pregnant or you sign the papers or whatever, like, that's okay.
Yeah, you change.
Cool. Like,
you just change it.
Yeah.
You just change the decor.
Yeah.
You can sell the bed. You can give it to a family member. Like, you can just change it. It's not permanent. Like, it's okay to I know everyone's like, oh, I hate the word pivot. I don't hate the word pivot. Like, you can just pivot.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah. My wife will appreciate that. She's a big Friends person. So yeah, I love that. Yeah. Tell me, for people who don't know your story, last time we had you on here, and kind of how I had known of you was successful luxury high-end wedding photographer, 5-digit weddings, which in the DC area, DMV area, also a Harry Potter lover, and
guilty as charged.
Yeah. And also like you had a very well included fascination with ballet and ballerinas and Paris. And so, and you're crushing it. You're doing awesome. Matt was working with you, your husband, who I would also agree is like the most humble and awesome dude ever. And it was great. But it seems like things have changed for you outside of, Felix, of course. Everybody's going to know your son's name now. I'd be like, what? But like outside of having a child, I believe that you're doing other stuff now. So tell me, fill in some of the gaps for me. What's happening the last 3-4 years, and what that's looking like for the future. Yeah.
So a couple of years, I want to say I started shooting. I shot my first brand portrait session in 2016, and at the time it was like oh yeah, I'm just doing it for a friend. It was for Natalie Frank. She was like, listen, we're redoing our website. I'm redoing my website, and me and my designer, Jen, both agree you're the perfect person to shoot these brand photos. And I'd never shot anything like that before. And I was like, okay, like I'll do that for you. And then it turned into a thing. And it took a few years for it to turn into a thing. So last time we talked, when did we talk? 2017? Was that the last?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was like still not even really on my radar. It was like this thing that I had done like a couple times. And then, then like Jasmine Star referred me for a client. And I was like, okay, what is that about? And then it started picking up momentum. So when you and I talked last time, it was still just kind of like this weird oddity thing that I didn't really talk about that I did. But since then, and it's been much more intentional the last 2 years. We officially launched a branding arm of our business under the same umbrella. But we launched that as like hey, this could help us even out maybe some of the weddings, because I'm not saying this is a rule for all parents, but like for me, having the prospect of having a calendar with like 20 Saturdays that are taking me away from my home for like anywhere from like 10 hours to 3 days, depending on where we're shooting. I miss those times with my family, and those are and I think high-end wedding photographers will also agree that the higher the price point, the more pressure there is. There's pressure for any wedding photographer because it's a sacred day that we're being invited into, and you can't do it over. But when the collection pricing gets to a certain point and higher, there's just a lot more moving parts in the wedding day. And so there's a lot more things to keep track of, and it results in a higher pressure situation often. So when you combine the time commitment and just the fact that like my body would pay for weddings for like a day or two afterwards. I don't know if you experience the same thing, like the classic wedding hangover, that has nothing to do with alcohol. It's just, you like get out of bed the next day and you put your feet on the floor and there's like pain shoots up your calves.
100%.
That combined with the pressure, we were realizing like, you know, maybe weddings isn't where we want to be for forever.
Sure.
So I'm still shooting weddings these days. But we were like, this branding thing, like I really enjoy doing this and I seem to be pretty good at it. So let's put this out there as an official offering and see what happens. And it took off. And it took off because my background is in communications and PR. And so I love the language of interpersonal communication and the way that people relate to one another. And I think it's fascinating how that interacts with photography and marketing. And so the way that branding photography has the opportunity to connect with your audience when done well, that it serves as a point of saying like, hey, you and I, we get each other. And because we get each other and you can tell right away just by scrolling through my Instagram feed or taking a look at my sales page, or you come across my Facebook ad, like every touch point with the photographs all send home the same message, and it earns trust. I'm so fascinated by that. And so because I was approaching brand photography in a way that was very different than anyone else was on the market, I think that was what made it so remarkable was, whoa, those stand out and those speak for themselves. And those are helping their clients reach their people. And so we started, like things really picked up steam when I shot for Ashlyn Carter. And then like Caitlin James booked me, and I've shot for Riley Sheehy. I'm hoping to shoot for Natalie again. Natalie, if you're listening to this, let's get something on the books.
She's coming back too. It's like a reunion tour. It's going to be awesome.
I love her. I love her so much. I can't wait to read her new book. But it just like, it started picking up steam. And then we got, because again, like it's still such a new niche. Like it's really only like brand photography as we know, it's really only like 2 to 3 years old. And so there aren't very many people out there who are doing it really well. And I already had the brand equity under my name as a wedding photographer. And then I also had the reputation as an educator. And so then we started getting requests from photographers like, hey, when are you going to teach? Like, not just can you, but like, when are you teaching a workshop on this? Like, I want to learn how to shoot brand photos. I'm interested in it. And it's interesting because a lot of those requests were coming from people who shoot weddings and families who were like, COVID showed me I cannot depend on weddings to be as reliable as they used to be. And so I need to diversify. So literally just yesterday, we wrapped up our first launch of Brand Photography Academy, and it went 3 times better than we could have expected it to. More than that, it was incredible. And so things have shifted in our business from being like Abby, the luxury wedding photographer, to like Abby, the brand photographer, and also wedding photographer. But like branding is really like what I feel like we're becoming known for. And so it's interesting, especially because like we haven't been able to travel the last couple of years, that like love and influence, how influenced I am by all things Europe, like that's still there, but it's not quite so like in your face. And it's interesting because the way that it's just an interesting study in branding. Like our clients know about us, what we tell them, you know, like people know that I love France because it was all over my website, all over my social media. They know I love Harry Potter because my Instagram bio says Hufflepuff on it. And so like I learned that if I wanted to have a reputation as a brand photographer, I had to start telling people that. It wasn't just enough to like throw up one photo from a brand session and be like, now booking for Q2 2021. It needed to be a consistent message that people heard over and over and over again. I had to tell them that that's what I wanted them to know me by. And so those sort of core messages, the ones that you rattled off, like, okay, you're a high-end wedding photographer in the DC area, loves Harry Potter, loves France, loves ballerinas. Those are 5 things that I told you to know about me, and not in a manipulative way. It was just like, hey, these are like brand boosters for me, and they are representative and indicative of who I am. And those things are still true about me, but those are no longer, I would say, maybe the most important things to know about me as a brand. And it's been a gradual shift over the last couple of years. And so that ballerinas sort of storyline is still there. The loving France is still there, but it's more of like a background storyline that flavors the other ones. Like that love of Europe influences how we see other things, but it's like, you wouldn't go to my social media and find like photos of Paris all over it like you might have done 4 years ago. That was a really long answer. Sorry.
No, I love it. I mean, that's why we have you on. No, this is great. There's so much there. I want to ask, when you first started doing brand stuff, I imagine, like many photographers who, it sounds non-romantic, but it would not take that much work for me to, I've taken a few family photos in the past that I do think are nice, right? But to put something on the site, make an Instagram post, hey, we're now accepting family photos. What's up, everybody? Right? Like,
I'm here.
Yeah, exactly. Like, just be like, okay, and have it as an add-on or whatever, and just, and people might feel weird about it, but it's like, we also are a business. So if there's a new way we can make money, great. But also, if we enjoy all that kind of stuff, when you were first starting, if you don't mind sharing, like, were you thinking of it as something like that, where you're like, okay, I'm going to offer this thing. It's going to be cool. Hopefully we book a handful of these a year. This will be cool. Were you charging accordingly to that as well? And then now has that changed?
So
as you become more intentional behind it?
That's a good question. Yeah. So when we first put it out there, it was very much like but I hope this works. Kind of like we've booked a few of these so far, and we've, had a few more people inquiring about them. So like, let's make this more of a legit offering and actually tell people we're doing it. And it came from a place of, I'm good at this. And also we want some more consistency in our calendar. But we didn't think that it was like, I think our goal was like, hey, let's see if we can replace maybe half of our weddings income with branding.
Yeah.
Let's see. And so, we did charge in a way that was commensurate with what we were charging with weddings. And that's like, so that's one of the things that, I think people miss out on is like, okay, you're putting a new offering out there. It has to be in line with the brand equity you already have established. Like you can't be a mid-tier or like budget wedding photographer and then put out branding photography and expect to charge top of the line. What kind of reputation have you already built for yourself, and where sort of do you fall in along the bell curve? And that's roughly, if you're adding a new service, that's roughly where you need to start. That's not to say you have to stay there, but like if I was charging $10,000 for wedding photography and then coming in and offering $400 half day sessions for branding photos, there's a huge disconnect there. And I also think it's heavily influenced by who it is that you want to work with. So for me, my sweet spot with branding clients is creative, high performing, sales-driven small business owners. We're talking like high 6 and 7 figure small business owners with multiple streams of revenue. We're talking educators, speakers, people who maybe have subscription platforms, who are also like among the best in their field. And I knew that if we wanted to reach them, we had to charge prices that spoke to the level of expertise that I was bringing that they would expect to charge. So like if you've ever walked into a service provider's office and they quoted you a rate that was far below what you were expecting to pay, like what's the first thing that goes off in your mind? Not like, ooh, discount. It's, ooh, like what's wrong here? Like why is there something that I'm not getting? Like, is there a way that you're unqualified that I'm not aware of? And so that rate was almost like the rates that we established at the very beginning were meant to attract the clients I was excited to attract. They were meant to be on par with roughly what we were charging for weddings, not like hour by hour, but just in terms of like, does this feel like it correlates? But then also like, would you take me seriously with this number? Because if I told you a 4-hour photo shoot was going to cost you $600, like I wouldn't book that. That's not meant to disparage. That's not, I really want this. I don't want that to come across as condescending. I just mean that like with the people, like if we're going after business owners who are earning high 6, maybe 7 figures, when you're undercharging, it undercuts the trust. And so like that number attached to your name is a way of establishing you can trust me. And I learned this with weddings because as I was trying to, it was probably like 2014, 2015. I really wanted to push past the mid-tier wedding market into the higher end market. And I was having a conversation with a wedding planner and was like, listen, this is what I'm thinking of charging. Do you think your clients would book that? And she was like, to be honest with you, that's a little low. And I think that if I sent that to my clients, they might think, what are we missing out on if we book her? Like, because the way that when you've set aside a certain amount of money to pay for a product, right? You expect to pay that much. Like, people equate cost with quality. And I really think that's what this part of the conversation boils down to. People equate cost with quality. And if you give them a cost that's too low, they're either going to assume you're cutting corners or you're not actually as good as you say you are. Because for example, Louis Vuitton, the leather goods company, it says on their website, they never discount. They don't do it. And it says on their website, if you find a discounted Louis Vuitton product, you should be skeptical. So a Louis Vuitton purse that should cost, let's say $1,200. I don't know. I never bought one. Let's say it costs $1,200. If you find one for $400 and you're familiar with what Louis Vuitton should cost, your first reaction isn't, ooh, discount. It's, ooh, like this must be a knockoff. And so I think that like pricing is a very subtle way to demonstrate value, and to demonstrate expertise, and just even to earn your client's trust.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I know you because I know that you're you, and also I see kind of the behind the scenes a little bit where people listening, you're not just showing up, at Natalie's house as an example, and being like, okay, friend, let's just see what we've got, and let's see if we make this out. Like, you're using your comms background and your experience to have a very intentional experience with the client, and you're doing a lot, maybe not the same amount as weddings, but you're doing a lot of pre and post work.
It's actually, it's more pre-work than weddings. That's insane. Yeah. So the process that and this is so like I mentioned, we just got finished with the launch week of our course. And that's like one of the biggest hurdles for people who are looking to move into branding photography that they have to overcome, that you have to stop thinking like a relational documentarian, like someone who shows up and just shoots whatever's in front of you. And that's not to say that you don't prepare for weddings, because you do. You have all of your details, you have your gear, you know where you're going, you know the bride and groom story. But like, it's not, I wouldn't say that shooting weddings is like an exercise in strategic marketing, right? Like, it's an exercise in documenting relationship and documenting the first day of someone's love story. So the way that you prepare for that is very different than the way that you would prepare to photograph marketing material that's meant to drive sales. And so that process for us, it starts with the very first phone call. I get on the phone with every single client. I don't care how well I know you. We're having a consult call. From that consult call, we have a pre-shoot questionnaire that we send out that gathers a lot more information from me. I spend several hours researching my clients' brands and formulating a shot list. Ooh, I know that's a dirty 4-letter word for wedding photographers, but I have like a 2 to 3 page for my full day clients. I show up with a 2 to 3 page shot list with pretty, like, we're talking like, okay, shoot this with negative space to the left, shoot this one from the eyes down with the focus on the thing in the hand. Like, it's very detailed. That's not to say there isn't room for like artistic interpretation on the day of, but like, then I have a pre-shoot call with all of my clients. Then I send them an email a week out with like a packing list. And then we arrive early on the day of, and I have an assistant with there's a whole process to it, because I found that if we want images that go to work for a business, that they have to be shot from, they can't just be, you show up and shoot what's in front of you. It's like moving from a documentary mindset to that of an investigative journalist. Like, you have to be able to know how to ask the right questions. And in knowing how to ask the right questions, you're asking those because you're not just you're shooting what's in front of you. You're creating, you're taking concepts, intangible concepts. And that's the mark of a good brand photographer, is that you can take intangible concepts and make tangible photographs out of them. So for example, my client, Ashlyn Carter, is launching email templates at some point this year. And so as we're sitting there on her pre-shoot call, she's like, I'm just having trouble pairing imagery with this offer, because one of my trademark lines is, trust me, the world doesn't need more photos of you or your client smiling at a laptop, because that's what people think brand photos are. It's like, right. You're just sitting there smiling at your laptop, maybe tucking your hair behind 100%. Your ear, clutching a cute anthro mug. Like, stop it.
Blazer.
Right. Yeah. Stop it. The world doesn't need, it's passé and it's boring. And it doesn't stop the scroll, and it doesn't grab your client's attention. It may be like a useful trust enhancer on the website, but that's not going to cut it for a brand session. And so for Ashlyn, the how do you take email is a very intangible concept. right? It's electronic mail. There is no physical representation of it other than what you see on your screen. And so how do we take the concept of email templates and make it physical and make it visual in a way that's like so easy to understand other than just showing someone smiling at their laptop? And being able to do that is what helps to immediately grab the client's audience's attention. Because that's the thing is like branding photographs, you're not shooting those for the client's enjoyment. You're shooting them for the enjoyment of their audience. So it's going back to your like question about prep work. Like there's a lot of like that shot list. I put a ton of intention into that because my hope is to deliver a gallery of images that are very, very purposeful and very thought out and very marketing minded and strategic, and not just because that's what I did for Natalie's shoot. Natalie's shoot was my first one. I was like, well, what are the day of details? Like basically collected information like I would for a wedding. Where am I going? What time are we starting? And who else is going to be there? And I look at that collection of images and I'm like, they're pretty, but they're not purposeful. They were not purposeful enough. And did they serve their purpose at the time? Sure. But like, that's not enough anymore. They have to be purposeful.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think it's funny. We might have never talked about this, but I found this out by accident, which was very helpful. But when I was a concert photographer and between that and doing some corporate work for just corporate events, like there's a big thing in events now where you basically have to create what looks like marketing level, like ad work where, hey, let's, plan out an ad on set and do these kind of intentional images, but they don't want to do that. They want to make it from events. You're like, oh, that's the worst challenge ever. Okay, great. But one of the benefits I found, and I think for me, one of the fun challenges is for those two worlds, once they found out for me, like I knew what their goal was, and their goal was not like, hey, make our event look cool. Like my goal is to sell tickets, right? Like there's a value in recognizing like what's the upper level goal here.
That's why I start. That's one of the questions I ask every single client. I actually ask this on the contact form when they're booking their consult is what are your top 3 goals for the next 6 months? And that drives the whole session. Because if I don't know what your goals are, how can I be expected to create, how could anybody be expected to create images that support those goals if you have no idea what you're aiming at?
Right. No, totally. It's one of those things. And I think it helps them, from the pricing to how intentional you are to, the working with them, they know they can have that trust and be like, oh, Abby's on her team. She has the same goals as us. Like there's a balance of like, you're still to this day, which is wonderful. Like if a client's hiring you, you're not shooting for Abby, and I think having these clients that are maybe now are bridging the corporate world, they're making 6-7 figures. There's no line that it's not like you're shooting for somebody who's not successful. Like that's not happening, and they can trust you. And you're like, hey, I'm recruiting a team of winners, essentially. And like that's how I feel now with launching our course and stuff like that. Is like it's my first time. I feel like I'm assembling the Avengers.
Yes, I was just about to say I'm assembling a team.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like it's still risky, but it's like, I want people who have experience, maybe have a track record, case studies of other entrepreneurs or people they've helped, launches, etc. And it's a balancing act, right? And it's like I'm finding that out now with some people on the team where, I maybe got a good deal and they're great at the initial things we started about, but there's no expandability. I'm like, oh, I need you to do this. We're like, okay, maybe we have to add another Avenger, right? Or something like that. And so I just think that's understated for photographers who are trying to level up and level out on something that they want to do. And it's like, well, think about the high end goal, and even some of my luxury friends, and after talking to luxury wedding photographers, realizing that for many of them, not in a selfish way, but many of them, something they brought up in the sales process was like, do you want your photos to make you look awesome? And not just like generally make you look awesome, but make you look like you're, better than your friends, or like you had the party of the year or the party of the century. And I never even thought of that, right? Because we've talked about that. I've heard you talk on podcasts about like not maybe being in the luxury market as a person and then as a brand branching into that and how different that is. But like, that's a real goal, like if the parents are paying and they want to have this luxury wedding, that's $150K or $250K, like we would call it flexing now, but they want to flex, like they want to flex on some people. And so do you know Sam Blake?
I don't.
Oh, I think you would dig her. She's an Australian high-end wedding photographer. in New York City. Yeah, she's awesome. She's coming on the podcast. She's already been on, and we already have the very clickbait YouTube title of just booking $20,000 weddings with Sam, which I'm so pumped for. But she, we were talking about this stuff, and luxury photographers, from something as you don't know the why, you'd be like, hey, you should Photoshop out that exit sign. And you'd be like, it doesn't change the photo, or it doesn't matter, or whatever. But you've talked to luxury wedding photographers, they're like, no, that's like the bottom of the standard list. Like there is so much more, or arms, flattery, chins, all these things that like you're reaching that 0.01% of expertise and excellence, and you're getting paid for the decisions you make more than the actual like craft. And I think that's like being able to answer like you did, of course, because you have a lot of practice doing this now, plus with the course and teaching people how to do this. It's like, that's why you can charge what you want to charge, because you're in the 0.01%. And again, yeah, if you were just like, hey, I brought my camera to dinner, you want a headshot? Or like people who are charging CEOs who are getting $150 headshots. I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Would you do this?
He makes $4 million a year. He can pay more than $150.
Yeah. And, something I learned a long time ago, and I've always been like wanting to dive into, and I don't know if you do it this way, but value-based pricing. And for my corporate clients saying, in the process, how much do you expect to make in revenue off of this campaign? Off of this initiative. And they might say, we're hoping to bring in $10 million, right? And so I say, okay, I'll charge 0.1% of that. And then if, in the photography world, right, we're like, oh, we're booking $100,000 corporate gig, right? That's insane. You're right. Photographers are like, that's crazy. That's crazy.
Wait, what is 0.1% of 10 million?
I don't know.
Isn't it 10,000?
But you get, yeah, maybe it is. But you get, or 1% or whatever, you kind of get what I'm saying here. And when you bring it to them, you get to find out like, okay, you're gonna make so much money off of this tiny investment, and once they know that, it's like, okay, let's roll. And I think so. All that to say, like, yeah, it's just there's something about thinking about the excellence and the intentionality and the what is your client's goal, not your goal. You're not shooting for Abby or Adam. Like, I never show my corporate work. I'm not like, oh, look at this cool photo of two people shaking hands and it's very cool and it's going to sell tickets.
Yeah. Jen Olmsted, she's one of the designers behind Tonic Side Shop. It's her and Jeff Shipley, and they're both my designers, and I love them so much. And I love the way that Jen describes it. She calls it being a brand chameleon. Like when she designs someone's website, her job is to show up and inhabit their brain space so fully that when you look at their website, you don't see Jen Olmsted or you don't see Tonic Site Shop. If it's a custom job, you just see the brand owner. And like, it may be how well the design is put together that you're like, I bet this is a Tonic design, but it's not like, oh, this was definitely a Tonic Site Shop custom design. And like, that's what I feel like our job is as brand photographers. It's not to show up and make much of me. It's to show up and help you make much of your business in a way that connects with your audience. I think the way that you display that on social media is a little bit of a different story. Like, I don't post photos from every single brand shoot I've done because not every single brand shoot is like super on brand for Abby Grace, but it's on brand in terms of like what I want to offer as a branding photographer. And so I can show up and shoot fully for them without worrying like, oh, how's this going to look on my feed? Because I don't care. It's not for me. It's for them. And that's just the approach that I take. I know there's some brand photographers who have like a very consistent style. They only take clients who match that consistent style. And that's totally fine because that's what their clients want. But I know what my clients want. And it's images that go to work for them that don't stick out as like, well, that was clearly Abby Grace that took that.
Totally. Do you think that your approach to that is because you're still new in the branding game versus like weddings where you maybe said eventually you're only going to, take on weddings that match your brand, or do you think because it's so different, you don't mind?
No, I don't mind. I mean, I think it's an act of service to be able to show up that way. Like, it's not like, oh, I don't know what my style is, so I will just shoot for my client's style. I know what my style is, but I also know that my style is my style and it's not necessarily theirs. And when I say my style, I'm really talking about like editing styles here. Like, or like, I mean, for example, I shot a branding session for a gentleman who owns a design and construction business. So he specializes in high-end home remodels and historic renovations, which is like,
wow,
it's creative, right? So it still fits inside that genre of people that I specialize in, but it's not the Ashland Carters or the Caitlin James or the Natalie Franks. And so it doesn't fit as well on my website, but I loved shooting for him. It was so fun.
Right.
It doesn't match maybe the existing top 12 grid. So I probably won't put it on social media, but like it's going to go on my portfolio because it's a picture of the diverse kind of offerings that I do. And that wasn't an act of, well, I don't know what it is I want to offer. It was very intentional. We took him on as a client on purpose. So I think it varies from photographer to photographer. Like that's the approach that we found that works for us. I just think it varies depending on who it is that your client is. Like, are you serving the same type of clientele over and over and over again? Then yeah, it probably makes sense that like a lot of your images are going to look very similar because your clients are all attracted to similar things and want similar type of imagery. But because I'm shooting for, we use the term creative small business owners kind of loosely, like high-end home remodel and historic renovations, that maybe people are like, oh, is that creative? I'm like, it is though, because he's an artist. I do shoot for some realtors, which I would not categorize as the most creative field, but the way that my clients approach their marketing is very creative. And so I get to get creative with them on that. And so like I'm shooting for copywriters, I'm shooting for photographers, for real estate agents, for high-end home remodel construction business owners. And so that's going to look a little bit more scattered, even though I know the unifying factors behind that are like, there are unifying factors and themes behind those that
totally
weave them all together. But I think when your ideal client is, it's very, very like tight and nailed down to like people who have a certain type of look to their business, then it's natural that your images are going to probably look a little bit more similar from session to session.
Totally. Yeah. So it's not necessarily something that you're trying to avoid, but at the same time, you're open to it now to kind of, be okay with it. But if you had clients who maybe weren't as scattered as they are now, you'd be like, all right, like whatever, and again, like I think it's, if 5 out of 6 shoots have a photo where they can go to your feed, like great. But, and I think too, though, like, you've probably run into this, and I feel like a lot of, somebody's always going to ask, well, hey, can you do something like this or like mine or something that would work for us? Or what can you do that would work for us? Right. And like having people in the home space or that like the reconstruction and remodeling space, like you can have that case study and be like, hey, this is actually going to be perfect for you. Here's what we did, all that stuff. And, and it's kind of funny. I think, you've probably learned this too, where it's like for wedding photographers, our case studies were our blog posts or, portfolio level blog posts, right? Where like, yeah, I can shoot a wedding at that venue for you in this style that had this kind of aesthetic or whatever. And it's the same way, like you're trying to show like proof of work or proof of concept, for you. What do you think is after you just launched or closed the branding course, for people who want to get into it, like, what is the 0 to 1 step? They're a good photographer. They're a good wedding photographer. They've got, Harry Potter photo on Instagram.
We're already
They're
friends.
ready to go. They have 819 followers. Sure. But the wedding business is okay. They're doing solid. Like they feel good about it. But they're like, yeah, this sounds attractive to me. This sounds fun. I would love to do this well. And at least in the DMV in our area locally, even, I feel like there's still a lot of opportunity and untapped potential for sure.
Well, we're still in the stage of, I don't know if you're familiar with the 4 stages of the buyer journey, but the first stage of any buyer journey is awareness, is becoming aware of the fact that the buyer has a problem and that they're going to need to find a solution for that problem. And we, as the service providers, because our buyers, a lot of them aren't even in that awareness. They're in like stage 0. They don't even know they have a problem. And so because they don't know they have a problem, they don't know that there's a solution for that problem, even though that problem might be causing them pain that they're not aware of. It's like when when your spine is out of alignment and like your jaw is clicking. And your jaw is clicking because you think you have TMJ, but actually something's wrong with your spine. And so you keep trying to fix the jaw issue when in reality, if you would just go to the chiropractor, things would get better. So maybe you have...
Can I ask you a question real quick? Just so talking about the 0 to 1 thing and the buyer's journey, I love that. But as a practical example, do you think like your client who's in stage 0, are they maybe they fit your bill, like you said, like creative small business, high earning, successful, launching person? Is it one of those things where like maybe the ad to them, or maybe the agitation of the fear for them is like, what if your brand photos are costing you money? Is that the 0 level kind of thing? Like, hey, things might be going well and you don't know that you have an issue, but you could be making more money if you had better photos at the grand scheme of things.
You could. I think that's probably a really soft way to approach it that may not.
Okay.
I think the more
or like, what is their fear at stage 0? Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, I would say they're not aware that they have a fear. Maybe something's not working and they're not sure what it is. And so they try like, oh, well, maybe we need to update our website, or maybe we need to send out some more ads on Facebook. But like the pain point, what I found with my ideal clients is the pain point is they don't have enough photos. And so they're either spending too much time going through old photos and trying to figure out which ones can reuse, or they're having to like real quick, like duct tape together photos. Like, oh, I'll go outside and when I was talking to Caitlin, she was like, yeah, every time we've needed to update headshots, I'll just be like, hey, Michael, like, let's go outside real quick and he'll take a couple pictures for me. But they never had a library of images to pull from. And so the pain point for my clients is they have a consistent need for photos, but they don't have a consistent source of photos. And so for maybe a brand photographer who's looking to break in, and let's say your target audience is makers and artisans, very small, like solopreneurs, makers and artisans. Maybe their pain point is they know they need to be showing up on social media more, but they don't have good photos of themselves. And so they just don't show up. And so they're having trouble connecting with their audience. And things aren't growing the way that they want them to, or maybe they're constantly getting emails for like, people don't, their audience doesn't understand that there's a human element to their brand. And so like, hey, are you missing that human element? Are you missing the opportunity to connect to people? If so, let's talk about how brand photos can help with that. And we talk about this. We talk about this in the course. I call it social selling. It's just demonstrating expertise in public as a way to raise awareness, as a way to take people from step 0 to step 1 of awareness that they have a problem and that you have a solution. So that looks like talking about problems that you've solved for other people. Like, hey, prior to shooting for Caitlin, this is how she used to, whenever they were updating their website, it was a matter of throwing on something cute, going outside, taking a few photos. And then what you end up with is this disconnected, disjointed collection of imagery that never feels consistent. After Caitlin's session, she has this library of X number of images and like, hey, swipe right for some screenshots of where she's used these all over her website. Look how consistent this looks. Look how much faster this process is for her in choosing images. So talking about the problems that your clients have, or that your hopeful clients you imagine they have. And I would say, don't just imagine that, actually talk to people, like do some market research, find out what are people's actual pain points, and then speak to those in a way that it doesn't feel salesy when you're just talking about, here's a problem and here's a solution that I provided. You don't have to end every single Instagram caption with inquire now for Q2 bookings. Like you don't have to hard pitch. If you just consistently show up and demonstrate expertise again and again and again, that's going to raise awareness in the minds of the clients, because eventually you're going to say something to your audience and they're going to be like, ooh, that's me. Like I see myself in that. Like I have that problem. Do I need brand photos? And like that gets the gear starting to turn of like, do I need brand photos? Well, I know Abby offers brand photos. Like maybe I should inquire with Abby. Like I didn't realize this was a problem, but like actually now that you mentioned it, oh, that does hurt. Like that doesn't feel good.
Yeah, totally. One last question before we go, because now I feel like we could just talk forever. What do you think for people listening who are primarily wedding photographers, just to help them, and they maybe never heard of the buyer's journey, right? Which I would highly suggest. We have an episode with Sam Jacobson they should listen to. But what are some of those 0 to 1 or level 1 outside of we need photos? Like what are some of those for wedding photographers, just so they can know, because I think how people have the solutions for problems. I always tell this to a lot of my mentees where I'm like, hey, you need to tell people that you do this, like 30-day turnaround or 14-day turnaround or whatever it is, or I do sneak peeks or whatever, all these things. And as industry professionals, we're like, these are standard, or, oh yeah, everybody I know does these, or I'm doing this because everybody I know does these.
Yeah.
But I'm like, this is still a great thing. You should tell people about it. What do you think people, wedding photographers specifically, need to do more in that field of like helping potential couples or potential brides, hopping on the train of like, okay, I get it now.
Yeah. So, I mean, I still think that comes down to social selling of like talking about this was the problem and here is the solution that we provided. So like maybe very practical example. I had a wedding in Brooklyn a couple of years ago and the bride and groom really, really wanted sunset portraits, but we were either like the Uber took too long or what we were trying to rush from Brooklyn Winery down to I don't know what river that is, but we were trying to get to the river's edge for the sunset. And, and so like you could talk about like, okay, here was the situation, timestamp on my camera. They're getting into the Uber at like 6:08 PM. Sunset was at 6:25. So the Uber drops us off at 6:13. We literally ran through the park, swipe right. Here's a picture of us running through the park with a bride, like hitched up her Haley Page dress. And then we had 3 minutes when we got there. I took a reading with my light meter. I shot two rolls of film in 4 minutes. And oh my gosh, it was so worth it. Here you go. And that demonstrates, one, I'll go to any length that it takes to get these photos for my clients. Also, look how amazing these sunset portraits are. Also, I shoot in Brooklyn. Yeah. And also my clients are willing to do whatever it takes to get these amazing shots. So I figure out what it is that's important to your client. And listen to those. I mean, testimonials, look back on your Wedding Wire testimonials. What is it that your clients hit on again and again and again that came up? Oh my gosh, Adam was incredible we were really nervous before our engagement session. And Adam was incredible about making us feel at home in our own skin. And I have never loved pictures of my fiance as much as I love these. So so maybe a pain point for your clients is they're worried they're going to look awkward. So you post put something on your website. You could even put something on your website, like a slider canvas on Show It of, does this sound like you? Or have you ever, before having your picture taken, have you ever thought, gosh, I'm so awkward. I wish I didn't look so awkward on camera. Or is this going to feel weird? Or how can we slow that? Maybe your clients are constantly afraid of not being able to spend enough time with their loved ones. That's really important to them, is gathering all these loved ones. And I want to have time to intentionally look each one of them in the eye and thank them for being here. And say, okay, I can help with that. We're going to structure your timeline in a way that allows you that. And we're not going to rush through. This isn't going to be 100 miles an hour. I mean, the day is going to be 100 miles an hour, but your photo experience won't be. And this is going to be an experience that allows you to cherish and savor those moments. So pay attention to what it is that your clients are saying. And you can literally ask them, send out a survey, say what were you worried about? What was your number one concern before hiring a wedding photographer, or your number one concern before having photos taken at your wedding? And now that you've had your wedding, were those concerns alleviated? If so, how? Straight up ask them for it. If you don't want to do it in a survey, I mean, you could use a Google form. If you don't want to do that, get on the phone with them and or get on Zoom and tell them you're going to record it, and then take those and put them into some kind of collection of, okay, befores and after. Before I was afraid of this is how Abby solved it. Before I was afraid of this, here's how Adam solved it. And then talk about those. We tend to think that we posted it one time on Instagram, the message is out there, everybody's heard it. No, they haven't. Nobody reads, not nobody, but your brain processes
less than 10%.
Yeah, your brain processes visuals 60,000 times faster than text. And so people are looking at your pictures are probably not always reading your text. So don't be afraid to repeat those stories over and over and over again, and let those stories become pillars in your business of, oh, Adam, he's the one who makes his brides and grooms feel like, what, fill in the blank, that's Abby.
Yeah,
she's the one she's the photographer for people who think they're bad at having their picture taken. Don't be afraid to brand yourself. Don't necessarily wait for your clients to brand you as that. If you're finding those common threads in the experience that you provide or the problem that you solve, own that. If you're the photographer who, I can't even think of a good example. Okay, Anchor and Veil, bold, and what is their tagline?
I don't remember. Colorful, bold, or
it's bold, intimate images. And one of the things that they talk about on social media is wedding photos that'll make your friends jealous. Own that. If that's something that your clients say to you over and over again, make that a pillar and say it everywhere. People, going back to what we were talking about at the very beginning, people know about your brand what you tell them to know about your brand. You cannot expect them to come to their own logical conclusion, because they're not going to read all of your Wedding Wire reviews. They're not going to read your entire website and be like, you know what? Abby seems like the kind of person who takes pictures that would make my friends jealous. Like, you have to tell them to think that about you. And because people are so busy and they have so many choices open to them, like, you have to make it clear from the very beginning what you are for and how you will help them achieve that.
I love it. That's the clip. No, I was kidding. I also love that you circled back to the beginning. I was like, yes, we have to tell people what we do or what we're into or about us or what we sell or how we can solve problems. Like, I think it's like, this is a very, very basic version of what we always talked about, but like wedding photographers who can't sell albums. And I'm like, have you ever posted a picture of an album or talked about it at all? Ever? Do you have a site about it? Do you ever email your clients about it ever? Do you like even know, like, does anybody know that you could do it? And they're like, no. And I'm like, well, you can't sell.
You have to tell people. You have to, Tyler McCall. Do you know him? He's an Instagram guy. He posted actually yesterday or the day before. Like, people have gone so far in the other direction from feeling. Nobody wants to feel salesy, so people just don't sell. But it's like, but you have to sell. Like, that's what Caitlin James is so good at selling. Like, she's always posting. And if you follow Caitlin, like, she's always posting about KJ All Access or like student success stories from her lighting and locations course. But does it ever feel salesy? It's just like, oh my gosh, guys, here I am in my office editing another episode of KJ All Access and look at this crazy behind the scenes. Isn't this ridiculous? Like, by the way, if you want to get a free episode, swipe up, you can have access to it here. It doesn't feel salesy. It feels conversational, but like, you have to, like, if you're going to sell, you have to be able to sell in a way that doesn't feel like a hard pitch every time. Like, Gary Vaynerchuk has a book called Jab, 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 Right Hook that talks about you have to offer,
give, ask.
Give, then ask. And I would say with today's market, like, you almost have to give like 10 times for every one ask, because people are just exhausted by the number of times they're being asked to purchase things throughout the day. And so when you can earn trust by giving and showing that you can demonstrate value for other people, then when you finally do ask, people are more ready to trust you because you've shown that you are worthy of their trust.
I love it.
There's another clip for you.
Yeah. Be like, listen, we need to make all of these into reels. No, I love this. Abby, where can people go to find out more about you? Are you doing any branding resources on the horizon, or is that like, hey, we have, like, what's going on?
So you can find me at Abby Grace Photo. We are adding some branding resources into our shop in the next couple of weeks. So I'm guessing by the time this goes live, they will probably already be there. We also have a free shot list download for brand photographers. It's the 9 archetypes of photos that I take at every single brand session. So if you have one coming up and you're like, I don't know what to shoot, go grab that shot list. It's at the link in my Instagram, and that'll help you, give you a little bit of direction in terms of, getting past the, like, here I am smiling at my laptop picture.
I love it. Abby, thank you so much. That was awesome.
Thanks, Adam.
Guys, thank you so much for checking out The Bearded Hog. It really means a lot. If you can, leave a like on the video. If you want to see more videos, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell for notifications on when new videos come out immediately. Have a wonderful day, guys, and keep being awesome.